So our next segment, we have a panel discussion, Amplifying Accessibility and Abolishing Ableism. So I'd now like to hand it over to the moderator, Jen White-Johnson. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Yes. This is awesome. I'm going to give everyone a moment to pop their cameras back on in true accessibility form. Folks are probably coming back from drinking some tea or so I'm just going to give about another minute or two. All right. And yeah, this is beautiful. So this panel is a dream come true for me. And I know that it's the beginning of many. So thank you so much for the State of Black Design Family Reunion experience. This is breathtaking to just be a part of all this virtual beauty. And even though I can't see everyone in person, but I can feel the love that has been consistently been coming through the chats during all of our panels. So thank you again. So again, I'm Jen White-Johnson. Just a quick image description of myself. I'm an Afro-Latina woman with caramel cinnamon skin. I'm wearing a red headband and I'm wearing yellow earrings that have a collage photograph of Tupac on them. I'm wearing bright gold red lipstick and I have a gap in my teeth. And what else? I'm wearing a really cool multicolored shirt that one of my former students from Bowie State University designed. And I have a background, you can see posters that amplify resistance and design justice and disability justice. So I'm coming to you from Baltimore, Maryland. Grew up in Washington, DC, grew up in PG County, and now, as I said, I'm residing in Baltimore, Maryland. And I do identify as a disabled designer, living with an autoimmune disorder, which is Graves' disease, also ADHD, also anxiety. And I'm a design educator. I'm a mother to a disabled son who is autistic, and currently teaching at the University of Minnesota School of Design. And I taught at Bowie State University for over 10 years. And I was on a panel earlier where we were highlighting and uplifting like HBCU design programs. And I continue to have a really beautiful relationship with my HBCU family at Bowie State. And my work and the purpose of this panel is really just to amplify the conversation of disability advocacy, making sure that visual culture is complete. You know, it's not Black visual culture, and the conversation of just Black in design can't be really complete without uplifting all Black bodies. You know, all Black bodies who exist, who have different body minds, who are exploring different ways of adjusting to life pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And so I'm happy to have this discussion. And I think that we can all agree that, you know, existing while Black and disabled during the pandemic continues to be, it continues to consume the disability community a great deal. And so each time we can meet in unity and disability solidarity like this, to specifically lead a conversation from the most that are impacted and to uplift the vitality of the Black disability community, along with our allies and accomplices that are joining us for this call. It's a huge thing. It means a lot to me because a lot of us, you know, don't get a chance to see each other. And so every opportunity where we can hold space for an honest exchange about, you know, disability celebratory practices like my panelists, you know, are rooted in, it's a good thing. And the conversation for this conference can't be complete without it. And so we're going to be talking about disability erasure in media, disability erasure in accessible teaching, and then uplifting what accessible teaching can mean, what collective care means, and how the design industry can't really exist without those conversations. And so I'm super excited, and we're going to be sharing our stories tonight. And we're going to be dropping links in the chat and resources, since we don't have a lot of time, but I want to make sure that I get right into it. I'm going to introduce my beautiful panelists that I love and admire so much. Andraea LaVant, who is the President and Chief Inclusion Officer of LaVant Consulting, that you really need to uplift and to follow and to hire. Andrea is a nationally and internationally sought after disability inclusion expert, most notably recognized for spearheading a global disability justice movement as impact producer for Netflix Oscar-nominated film Crip Camp that you should all see. As a Black disabled woman, Andrea champions intersectionality and is committed to working towards a future where all people, particularly disabled people of color, are seen, valued in culture and society at large. And we're going to get into what that really means. Regine Gilbert is a designer, educator, author, and a user experience designer with over 10 years of experience working in the technology arena and so much more. She has a strong belief in making the world an accessible place, a more accessible place, and one that starts and ends with the user. Regine's areas of research focus are digital accessibility, inclusive design, and immersive experiences. And in 2019, Regine's first book, Inclusive Design for a Digital World, Designing with Accessibility in Mind, was released through A Press Publishing, and I have that book. And I'm sure many of you, I hope many of you on the, on this call have it. And if you don't, you should own it. And so we're gonna get a chance to talk about everyone's efforts, to continue to hold space for equitable access and what that means in Black and Brown design spaces, because it's important and it's a conversation that we don't really get a chance to have. It's very, male, white male, cisgender oriented, and we feel like they are kind of like the backbone of the conversation of access when really they aren't. We know that disabled people have been making waves and opening doors and sending red flags and warning signs for generations in terms of what the community really needs. And so we're gonna get into that. And I also wanna give a beautiful shout out to Eva Queen, who is our interpreter for this evening. Thank you so much for holding space for the deaf and hard of hearing community tonight. So if you're watching, and if you are deaf or hard of hearing, just know that we see you. And we wanted to hold space for you tonight, okay? Thank y'all so much. And so we're just gonna get into it. I'm so excited, and I was reading a really heavy article as I was preparing for this panel that was released by the Center for American Progress that really specifically talks about Black disabled women and girls and the experience of economic insecurity at higher rates, and that 37% of African Americans, are below the poverty rate at this time. And that means whether they're artists, whether they're designers, you could still be living in poverty, especially as design students. And so I want to be able to get a sense of, culture, media, design education, and how you're using the cultural spaces within your work to help address those needs, to help address those particular concerns. So I'm just going to open it up and start, and we can, Regine or Andrea, if you wanted to chime in on that.
I never know who should start, but I guess I'll start. You can go. So hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. I am an educator, and I start with talking about accessibility day one in my classes, which doesn't oftentimes happen in a lot of design classes, and nor does it happen in a lot. So I teach in a school of engineering, and many of my students come to my class not knowing what accessibility is at all. And there might be some people here who don't know what accessibility is. So I will just define it. Accessibility is ensuring that digital products are created with folks with disability in mind so that they can use it regardless of whatever is going on with them. And another thing, I know we are going to address it here, but I thought, I don't know if we have defined ableism or if we're going to get in, when we'll get into that, but I think we need to define it for folks as well, because I think it's important that right from the beginning of any project that you're going to create, that you think about the fact that anybody might be accessing it, and if they can't see it, then how are they experiencing it? If they can't hear it, how are they experiencing it? If they can't touch it, how are they experiencing it? So it's thinking about providing those options, which that's all accessibility is at the end of the day, is providing options and ensuring that multiple people with different abilities can experience that thing, whether it's art or music or whatever it is.
Thank you. I'm going to first, so I'm Andrea, and I'm going to provide a visual description of myself. So I am sitting in a space in Los Angeles, California. I've got some bookshelfy type of stuff behind me. I am a brown skinned girl. I'm wearing glitter clear glasses, cat eye glasses. My hair is kind of an ombre braids. I'm wearing a cobalt blue shirt, some bright pink lipstick, and a kind of heather gray fedora type of hat today. So very excited about this conversation. The work that we do really stems around, shaping the way that the world reaches, views, and values disabled people. And I think that, that's where, when we look at the evolution of these conversations, where we may have started back 30 plus years ago with the Americans with Disabilities Act, thinking about things from a place of compliance, how do we make sure that we don't get sued, essentially, that we abide by the law, and then bringing in conversations around what's emerged over the past decade or so around disability justice, which I think, I'm excited to talk more about, and specifically in this space, thinking about collective access and what that means. And I'm really saying that, everybody has needs. It's not about a special need. It's not about, something separate but equal, but really that everybody has needs, and how do we create spaces that ensure that we all are considered, but specifically those of us with multiply marginalized experiences and identities. And then, where we live, and when you, Jen, talk about media representation and things of that nature, is bringing it into the cultural space. So, how making sure that it isn't just, again, that it's the siloed experience, but that we're part in every aspect of our lives, not just, legally, not just in an employment space, but really everywhere in our music, what we see on TV. The disability experience is not just considered, but that people are growing to the place where they understand that we're a really valuable perspective and asset and an aspect of diversity. So I'll leave it at that, because I'm sure we'll dive deeper into it.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you for being able to just quickly sum up, the cultural movements, specifically the movement work that helped to define, disability and how it applies to like how you exist and how you want it and how you want to continue to define your future. And just to get to Regine's point about ableism, I'm going to quickly define it as we're going to really get into the thick of it for this conversation. And disability justice lawyer Talila Lewis continues to be super consistent in terms of holding space for yearly updated definitions on what ableism is. And I'm going to read it quickly. So ableism is a system of assigning value to people's bodies and minds based on society's constructed ideas of normalcy, productivity, desirability, intelligence, excellence, and fitness. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in eugenics, anti-Blackness, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. This systemic oppression leads to people and society determining people's value based on their culture, age, language, appearance, religion, birth or living place, wealth, wellness, or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. You don't have to be disabled to experience ableism. And as we're talking about accessibility, like in the classroom, since I have a design educator and then a meteor cultural force like Andrea that helps to consult and to advise people on how to just uplift disability culture in general and how to hold space for it. I think it's important that we understand that there is no normal, and that within the classroom space, we need to continue to understand how can we create a space of celebratory practices and understand that any sort of cultural space is really about celebration, and it shouldn't necessarily be about this oppressive model of how disability is portrayed. So I want to be able to kind of get a snippet from each of you on what are some of the ways that ableism can exist in the classroom and then also in media, and how do you define, like, and how does your work really help to break those oppressive stigmas?
Well, I want to first say that, so I teach user experience design, and I also co-teach assistive technology class, teaching students about the assistive tech that blind and low vision folks use. I co-teach it with Gus Chalkias, who is blind. I think it's important that folks, and one of the things that came up recently that Gus talked about is a lot of people don't actually interact with folks with disabilities. And so therefore there becomes this, they do and they don't know it a lot of times too, right? And so I think that there is a great book that'll be in the list about disability etiquette, because I think a lot of folks don't know how to interact. There's a lot of societal issues and a lot of layered things. Differently abled is a preferred term by many. It's actually not at all. Disabled is not a bad word, everybody, at all. And the disability community actually prefers the word disabled. And I think that I'm just saying that the community in general is from what I've seen and from the people that I know, they don't feel that the word disabled is a bad word. And so it is, when we talk about ableism, I think there's a lot of internal ableism that happens. And I think the words that we say do matter. And I think we have to address the fact that people from different cultures address disability differently. People from different countries, people who have family from different countries address it differently than people in the United States. And we have a lot of people who are not from the United States who come here and address things differently than folks in the United States. So with that said, I will pass it to Andrea. I know we don't have a lot of time.
Thank you. I'm gonna lean into that a little bit more. For me, I own disability in the same way that I own every aspect of my identity. I'm not one hierarchy over another. I'm a disabled Black woman, have been, and I remember years ago hearing a colleague of mine talk about, you know, when we think about our rights in the Americans with Disabilities Act, when you're going to a place, when I'm going to a building and I can't access it, I'm not saying, you know, according to the differently able, it's the ownership of disability, and differently honestly implies that there is a normal. And that's what we're trying to get past, right? Is that there is a normal and I am different from the mainstream, and we are aiming to basically say, you know, we're owning this as who we are. And so with that, I think when we talk about media, what we're, and that's broad, not just on what we see on television, but in our marketing and in design in general, that we're still in a space of tropes. You know, there's in what we call inspiration porn, which is like the idea that a lot of the things that we do are extraordinary. Me getting up out of bed is extraordinary, that I need to be revered for, you know, just living everyday life. There's the idea that we need to be saved, that we need to be fixed, that there's something wrong, what we call the medical model of disability. There's the charity model, if you think back to, if you all remember the Jerry Lewis telethon and Jerry's Kids, I was one of those back in the day. So we're still in all kinds of ways. Think about memes that you see, you know, oh, this, isn't it sweet that this person asked this little girl to prom, you know, even though she's disabled. There's so many things that we're aiming to really push against, because again, it's an identity to really to be embraced and to be valued. And when we think about, again, our environments and how much the disabled experience, we're used to entering spaces that weren't designed for us. And so that means that we're like automatically innovative. We're always thinking about how to make, you know, creatively look at and create spaces that are inclusive and interdependent, where we can rely on one another to make it even more accessible, you know, to us. So, and then one of the reasons why I was really excited about this conversation is the Black disabled experience, and not saying it singularly, but this idea, and a lot of the work that we do is around, you know, building understanding that disability isn't a monolith, that you know, a lot of times what we're seeing today, it's like exciting to see disability represented a bit more in media, but it still centers often the white male experience or physical disability, not thinking about the fact that many of us, you know, carry multiple, even disabled identities. While I'm a wheelchair user, there are things that people, you know, may not see that are hidden disabilities. And so ensuring that we are considering the multiplicity of our disabled experiences, but not from a place of negativity, but of value.
I just want to add, moving away from using the word normal to using typical, because what is normal, right? That implies something that is not normal, right? So I think we can get away from using that word altogether and say typical. This is what we teach our students in our assistive tech class.
Mhm. Exactly. And so and thank y'all for just continuing to infuse your disability wisdom into this conversation. And that's exactly what I wanted. And I want to make sure that with the time that we still have, I want, and Andrea, like you brought this up, it's like, so often we don't really have these conversations in the Black space because there are so many different tropes or disability stigmas that are very much rooted, especially when it comes to the word disability and existing as a disabled person and being willing to like disclose that. I know one of the things that I do and is transparency from day one, as Regine was saying, that the accessible, like as a classroom or as a space, whether you're on set somewhere or whether you're in production, you say that this is a safe space to just exist, to be. And then I also disclose my own disabilities. So that helps to kind of break that hierarchical barrier of, oh, she's my professor, she's high and mighty, she's not going to necessarily understand or be open for like caring for me. But from day one, I say, these are the things that I'm living with and that I exist with, not so much that I'm like looking to fix or I'm struggling with. And I feel like, because it's like, in essence, there's the struggle, but then there's also the liberation that exists in disclosing and being transparent and being open. And that helps me get up every day. That helps me stay mothering to my kid. That helps me stay teaching. That helps me to stay open to cultivating conversations like this. And I'm always wondering, what are other Black folks in the design communities like this? How are you going to continue to build conversations with us about these topics? How are you going to continue to show up as accomplices and not just performative allies in spaces like this? But how are you going to continue to be open to understanding what accessibility means, and what are some strategies and methods that you can give to the folks that are on this call about equitable and accessible practices for those that need reminding?
Sure, I'm happy to offer a few. One thing that we do that's a very, I think, a practical, that even speaks into what you shared about your disclosure. Another piece is we do at the beginning of our meetings, at the beginning of conversations with clients, whoever, what we call an access check-in. And what that is at the beginning of any conversation is, do you have any access needs? What is it going to, how can you, what will enable you to be able to participate fully in this space, in this moment? And so, for me, it could be disability related or not, and what it's doing is normalizing that everybody has needs. So for example, if I were to say, today, hi, I'm Andrea. Today, I have not eaten and I'm going to be snacking in this meeting. Please, just, know that. Or I oftentimes, if it's an early morning meeting, I'm like, just letting you know I haven't had my coffee yet. So if I'm dragging a little bit, that is why. And so it's just normalizing. And then it could be disability, related. My personal care attendant, you might see her in and out behind me. She's supporting me today, or, whatever. And so that in and of itself is giving people permission to say, you know what? I have a need too. Everybody has needs. And so, and then you say, or you can say, my access needs are met. I'm fine. I have my water. I've eaten lunch. I'm good. And so that's one very practical way that we like to kind of offer. But and from an ally or accomplice perspective, we always really just encourage people to look at who's in the room, to look at who's in the space, and acknowledge, the fact that, we don't have a specific perspective, and not to speak up for, in the sense that you are taking the place of, but to even just acknowledge that, I'm not seeing and oftentimes what happens, for those of us with disabilities even, is, you think that one experience, the one disabled person can speak for all of us. And it's, and just like you've heard us here today, it varies. My one experience in the same way that your Black experience, or, whatever your gender identity is not speaking for everyone. I think it's acknowledging that, but as much as possible, creating space. And not just, I say sometimes it's not just about creating room at the table, but it's giving up your seat so that somebody else can be there instead, to offer those perspectives and experiences.
I love it, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea. That was awesome. One of the things that we encourage our students to do is design with and never for. I've been guilty of saying design for in the past, but the best thing is to design with. There is nothing like getting people with lived experiences of disability involved in the process. Nothing can replace that. Not your assumptions, not what you've seen, nothing. There's nothing like the real thing, right? Ain't nothing like the real thing. So design with always. That's my biggest thing.
I love it. Such gems. I see Andrea. I'm crying. It's like at the Oscars when they start playing the music.
Well, you still have a few seconds if you want to use that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, again, it's impossible to have a conversation like this in just a little bit of time. But thank you so much to Regine, to Eva Queen, to Andrea for just holding space for this much needed conversation. And even if it's just, even if this and somebody said in the chat, like, this is ministry, and I'm like, it is, because it's like making sure that collective care, community care is at the helm, which is one of the principles of disability justice. It's collective access and holding space for everyone and sharing resources. So I'm going to be dropping links in the chat. Make sure you follow everything that the panelists are doing, because there is a multitude of experience that we didn't even get into, especially when it comes to LaVant Consulting and making sure that there's equitable representation in the media. And as Antoinette Carroll says, we need to redesign these systems. We know what it looks like because all of these systems have been designed to oppress by design. And so what's our role? Like, what's really like our place within this thing that we call disability justice and diversity and inclusion when we really don't make space? So thank you so much for Omari for continuing to uplift our lived experiences, to continuing to uplift just the conversation, because that's really where it starts, the dialogue. But it's not over. So like catch us on the flip side at our next panel in the next few months. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
y'all so much.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Eva Queen, for the sign language interpretation. Appreciate that. Also, I want to point out, quite often, too often people will think of accessibility as sort of like, an other issue for someone else to worry about. But I do have news for you. As someone who's a primary caregiver for an aging family member, there are a lot of issues that you never thought would be affecting your life that potentially could as you age, or you have people in your family or friends that are aging, or just life happens sometimes. So keep your eyes and your ears open, and let's keep having this dialogue going.